There's a chess grandmaster who never speaks during a match. Not a word, not a sigh, not even a reaction when his opponent makes a brilliant move. His face is stone, his eyes reveal nothing. And yet, by the 20th move, his opponents start making mistakes. Not because he outplayed them on the board, but because the silence broke something inside their minds. This is the principle that Niccolò Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago, and it remains the most underutilized weapon in human psychology. The person who argues has already surrendered their power. The person who reacts has already revealed their weakness. The person who defends themselves has already accepted the role of the accused. Today, I'm going to share 9 psychological principles that will fundamentally change how you deal with difficult people, toxic competitors, and anyone who tries to drag you into their chaos. These aren't theories. These are battlefield-tested strategies that the most powerful figures in history used to dismantle their enemies without ever raising their voice. By the end of this video, you'll understand why silence is more devastating than any comeback, why your enemies want you to argue, and how to win psychological warfare before it even begins. Let's begin. 1. The gravity of non-reaction. Here's something that will change how you see every conflict for the rest of your life. When someone attacks you, verbally, professionally, or personally, they're not just expressing anger. They're making an investment. They're spending emotional energy, taking a risk, exposing their position. And like any investor, they need a return. That return is your reaction. Your anger, your defensiveness, your hurt feelings, your desperate attempt to correct the record. This is what they're hungry for. This is the fuel that justifies their attack and gives them power over your emotional state. Now here's what Machiavelli understood that most people miss entirely. When you refuse to give, that return, something fascinating happens. The attacker doesn't just feel disappointed, they feel destabilized. Their investment has vanished into a void. They've thrown a punch into empty air, and now they're off balance. I call this the gravity of non-reaction. Just like gravity pulls objects toward mass, your stillness creates a psychological weight that pulls your opponent's energy into nothingness. Think about the most powerful person you've ever met. Not the loudest, not the most aggressive, the most powerful. I guarantee you they had one thing in common: economy of response. They didn't react to everything. They chose when to engage and when to let things fall into silence. Here's the practical application. The next time someone tries to provoke you, imagine their words as a fishing hook dangling in front of your face. They want you to bite. They need you to bite. Your only job is to watch that hook sink uselessly to the bottom while you swim in whatever direction you choose. The less you react, the more they question themselves. 2. The mirror displacement. There's an old interrogation technique that detectives use on suspects who won't talk. Instead of pressing harder, they go completely silent. They let the silence stretch until it becomes unbearable. And almost always, the suspect starts talking. Not because they were forced to, but because human beings cannot tolerate a vacuum of response. This is what I call mirror displacement, and it's devastatingly effective against enemies who want to draw you into their frame. Here's how it works. When someone criticizes you, accuses you, or tries to make you defensive, instead of responding to the content of their attack, you respond with calm curiosity about them. That's interesting. What made you think about that? I'm curious. How long have you felt this way? Help me understand where this is coming from. Notice what's happening here. You haven't defended yourself. You haven't argued. You haven't accepted their frame. Instead, you've gently redirected the spotlight back onto them. Now, they're the one being examined. Now, they're the one who needs to explain themselves. Machiavelli wrote that the wise ruler never lets others define the terms of engagement. When you use mirror displacement, you're refusing to play on their battlefield. You're creating a new game entirely, one where they're suddenly the subject of scrutiny, not you. The psychological effect is profound. People who attack others are rarely prepared to have their motives examined. They expect resistance, not curiosity. When you give them curiosity, their entire attack framework collapses, and they're left stammering to justify why they felt the need to come at you in the first place. 3. The delayed strike. In ancient warfare, there was a tactic called the feigned retreat. An army would pretend to flee, drawing the enemy into reckless pursuit. Then, when the enemy was overextended, exhausted, and scattered, the retreating army would turn and annihilate them. This principle applies directly to psychological combat. Most people, when attacked, feel an overwhelming urge to respond immediately. There's an almost primal need to defend yourself in the moment, to correct false accusations before they spread, to fire back while your anger is hot. This is exactly what your enemy wants. Immediate responses are almost always weaker than delayed responses. When you react in the moment, you're operating from emotion, not strategy. You're likely to say something you'll regret, reveal information you should have kept hidden, or escalate the conflict in ways that hurt you more than your opponent. The delayed strike works differently. When someone attacks you, your first response is no response. You let time pass. You let them wonder if their attack even registered. You let them exhaust themselves with follow-up provocations that go nowhere. Then, days or weeks later, when they've moved on, when they think the matter is settled, when their guard is completely down, that's when you act. Not with anger, but with calculated precision. You make your move when it will be most effective and least expected. There's a reason that revenge, as they say, is a dish best served cold. Heat makes you reckless. Cold makes you precise. Here's the key. During the waiting period, you're not passive. You're observing. You're gathering information. You're identifying weaknesses. You're planning. While your enemy thinks they've won because you didn't fight back, you're preparing a response they never saw coming. Patience isn't weakness. Patience is the weapon of someone who knows they can afford to wait. 4. The indifference weapon. There's a psychological phenomenon that researchers call the spotlight effect, the tendency for people to believe others are paying more attention to them than they actually are. Your enemies suffer from this same delusion. They believe you're thinking about them. They believe their attacks are keeping you up at night. They believe they occupy space in your mind. What destroys an enemy faster than any argument is discovering that they're irrelevant to you. This is the indifference weapon, and Machiavelli considered it one of the most powerful tools of statecraft. He observed that rulers who showed genuine indifference to their critics gained power, while rulers who obsessively responded to every attack slowly bled credibility. Here's why indifference works. Hatred is a form of connection. When you hate someone, you're bound to them. You think about them. You track their movements. You care about their opinions. In a twisted way, your hatred gives them importance. But indifference? Indifference is exile from your mental kingdom. It says, you don't matter enough for me to hate. You don't warrant the energy of my anger. You're simply not a factor. This is psychologically devastating to someone who attacked you expecting to become your obsession. They wanted war. They wanted drama. They wanted to matter. Instead, they got nothing. They got the realization that their existence doesn't register on your radar. The practical application is this. When someone wrongs you, the most powerful thing you can do is visibly thrive without any reference to them. Don't talk about them. Don't post about them. Don't let mutual friends know how you feel. Simply live your life as if they never existed. Let their own imagination torture them with the question, did I ever matter at all? 5. The reputation fortress. Machiavelli made an observation that most people ignore at their peril. Your reputation fights battles on your behalf, even when you're not present. Here's what this means. Long before any conflict begins, you've already won or lost, based on what people believe about you. If your reputation is that of someone reasonable, competent, and fair, then any attack against you starts from a position of doubt. People will question the attacker, not you. But if your reputation is damaged or undefined, every attack lands with full force. You have to defend yourself from scratch every single time. This is why the truly strategic never neglect reputation building, even when, especially when, there's no immediate threat. They understand that reputation is a fortress you construct during peacetime so that it protects you during war. Here's the principle. Never argue to defend your reputation. Instead, let your reputation make arguments unnecessary. How do you build this fortress? Through consistent, visible patterns of behavior. Through keeping your word even when it's inconvenient. Through treating people fairly, even when you have power over them. Through being the same person in private that you are in public. Over time, these patterns create a shield that deflects attacks automatically. When someone says something negative about you, people who know your reputation will dismiss it without you lifting a finger. They'll think, that doesn't match the person I know. This is far more powerful than any argument you could make in your own defense. When others defend you, it's believable. When you defend yourself, it looks desperate. Build your fortress before you need it. The enemy you haven't met yet is already forming opinions about you based on what they hear. Make sure what they hear makes them hesitate to become your enemy in the first place. 6. The energy calculation. Every conflict has a cost. Time, mental energy, emotional resources, opportunity cost of what you could be doing instead, reputation risk, relationship damage. Most people enter conflicts without ever calculating these costs. They fight because they feel wronged, because their ego demands satisfaction, because backing down feels like losing. Machiavelli was ruthlessly practical about this. He understood that sometimes the wisest victory is the battle you refuse to fight. Here's the energy calculation principle. Before engaging any enemy, honestly assess what you stand to gain versus what you stand to lose, including the hidden costs of distraction and obsession. Often, when you run this calculation honestly, you discover something sobering. Even if you win the conflict, you lose. You lose time you could have spent building something valuable. You lose mental peace that fueled your creativity. You lose the respect of people who watched you descend into pettiness. The strategic mind asks, is defeating this person actually valuable? Or am I just satisfying my ego at the expense of my larger goals? Sometimes the answer is yes, the conflict matters. Some battles must be fought. But many conflicts that feel urgent in the moment are actually irrelevant to your long-term trajectory. They're distractions disguised as important fights. Here's a practical test. Imagine yourself 5 years from now. Will you even remember this conflict? Will the outcome matter at all to the person you're becoming? If the answer is no, then why are you giving it any energy today? Conserve your ammunition for enemies that actually matter. Everything else is noise. 7. The information asymmetry. In any conflict, knowledge is power. But here's the deeper truth. The appearance of knowledge is almost as powerful as knowledge itself. When your enemy doesn't know what you know, they become cautious. They second-guess their moves. They imagine you see threats they can't perceive. They assume you're playing a deeper game. This is information asymmetry, and you can cultivate it deliberately. The principle works like this. Reveal less than you know, observe more than you seem to, and occasionally hint that you understand things you shouldn't. Practically speaking, this means becoming excellent at listening and terrible at speaking. Let others fill silences with information, while you absorb everything and give away nothing. When you do speak, be precise but incomplete. Say enough to demonstrate competence, but never enough to show your full hand. There's a technique I call the knowing pause. When someone says something that reveals their strategy or exposes their weakness, don't react immediately. Just pause. Let a slight smile cross your face, then change the subject. That pause will haunt them. They'll wonder, what does he know? Did I reveal something I shouldn't have? What is he planning? You may know nothing special at all, but their imagination will construct elaborate theories about your hidden knowledge, and they'll modify their behavior based on phantoms of their own creation. The person who seems to know more than they reveal always commands respect and caution from potential adversaries. 8. The alliance architecture. No matter how strong you are individually, isolation is vulnerability. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized that the wise never stand entirely alone. They cultivate relationships that serve as both shields and weapons. This is alliance architecture, the deliberate construction of a network that makes attacking you costly. Here's the psychological reality. Before someone decides to become your enemy, they calculate risks. They ask themselves, who will support him if I attack? Who will retaliate on his behalf? What powerful people will I offend by making this move? If the answer is no one, then attacking you is low risk. But if the answer is several formidable people who value him, then suddenly the calculation changes entirely. The key is that these alliances must exist before you need them. You can't build a support network in the middle of a crisis. By then it's too late. So here's the practice. Invest in relationships with no immediate agenda. Help people when you don't need anything from them. Be the person who connects others, who celebrates others' success, who shows up during others' difficult times. These deposits build a reserve of goodwill that compounds over time. When you eventually face an enemy, you won't need to ask for help explicitly. People will offer it, because you've demonstrated that you're worth defending. The ultimate power isn't being invulnerable yourself. It's being connected to enough other powerful people that attacking you means attacking all of them simultaneously. 9. The victory through transcendence. Here's the final principle, and in many ways, it encompasses all the others. The ultimate way to defeat an enemy is to make their opposition irrelevant by growing beyond their reach. Think about it. Most enemies in your life are fighting you for something at your current level. A coworker competing for the same promotion. A rival business targeting the same customers. A critic trying to keep you in the same status tier. But if you grow dramatically, if you ascend to a completely different level of achievement, their opposition becomes meaningless. The promotion they were fighting you for becomes trivial because you've become the person doing the promoting. The customers they were stealing become a rounding error because you've expanded into markets they can't access. The status tier they were policing becomes irrelevant because you've entered circles they can't even see. This is victory through transcendence. You don't defeat enemies by fighting them at their level. You defeat them by becoming someone they can no longer compete with. Machiavelli observed that the most durable victories weren't won through combat. They were won through growth that made combat unnecessary. The prince who becomes genuinely powerful doesn't need to defeat his rivals. They simply stop mattering. This reframes the entire concept of dealing with enemies. Instead of asking, how do I beat this person? Ask, How do I become someone for whom this person's opposition is irrelevant? The energy you would have spent fighting them goes instead into building yourself. And the beautiful irony is that this building process is exactly what renders them powerless against you. Let me bring this all together. The arguing person has already lost. The reacting person has already surrendered their power. The defending person has already accepted the frame of the accuser. True psychological victory comes from a completely different approach. You master the art of non-reaction, letting attacks fall into a void that destabilizes your opponent. You redirect scrutiny away from yourself and onto those who attack you. You delay your responses until the moment of maximum effectiveness. You weaponize indifference to exile enemies from your mental kingdom. You build a reputation that defends you automatically. You calculate the true cost of conflicts and refuse the ones that aren't worth the price. You cultivate information asymmetry that makes others cautious. You architect alliances that make attacking you expensive. And ultimately, you transcend to levels where former enemies become irrelevant. This is the Machiavellian way, not cruelty, not manipulation, but clear-eyed strategic thinking about human psychology and power dynamics. The next time someone tries to pull you into an argument, remember, they need your participation. They need your emotional investment. They need you to fight on their battlefield. Don't give them any of it. Let your silence speak. Let your success answer. Let your growth be your ultimate reply. Because in the end, the person who wins isn't the one who argues best. It's the one who makes arguing unnecessary. If this resonated with you, do me one favor. In the comments below, tell me which of these 9 principles you most need to work on. I read every comment, and I'll respond to as many as I can. Hit subscribe if you want more content like this, and check out the video on screen now for more psychology insights that will change how you see the world. Until next time, stay strategic.